So unfortunately, we weren't able to access directly Mariupol, so we were 20 kilometers around. During 5 days, we were in the area. This was actually the first cross-line operation that the International Committee of the Red Cross was able to carry out. So what we saw is basically the needs of the people who are able. There's a trickle of people actually being able to get out of Mariupol. And we were able also to have a convoy leaving on Tuesday, arriving on Wednesday in Zaporizhzhia with 7 buses with 350 civilians in it, mostly families, elderly people, and also a convoy of cars basically who have been joining us through the convoy where we could really see what the Red Cross represents as terms of protection. So when we left Berdyansk on Tuesday morning, people had been waiting for us since 5 o'clock in the morning in the cold. When we left, there were 7 buses, 350 people in it. Then there were about less than 10 cars. When we arrived in Zaporizhzhia, there was 100 cars with us. So we estimate that in the end, we were able to bring to safety around 800 to 1,000 civilians. What we saw, of course, is that they are exhausted psychologically, physically. We would really see scenes of people crying as they were boarding the buses because they were relieved they were going to be brought to safety, but others saying that they had left families behind. I know of 2 unaccompanied minors who were on the convoy, and one 14-year-old girl was being basically sent to safety by her parents, but they were staying behind in Mariupol. Fortunately, she was joining her brother in Zaporizhzhia, so now she's not alone. But you have to imagine this teenager walking out of Mariupol, of course, exposing herself to danger, and still concerned, of course, for the situation of the family. And what people have been telling us is in Mariupol, there's no food, water, electricity, barely any connectivity since now a month. And there are few areas where people can connect, but it's outside. So basically they're exposing themselves to danger. So they're completely cut off from the world, from news, from their families. And those, of course, who have been able to get to safety are extremely worried for those they have left behind because they know they won't be able to contact them and get any news. What we also saw is that in the area there are places, of course, where people can't connect. So they're completely lost how to move forward, where to go. And fortunately, the villages around are giving them shelter, are giving them food, are helping the way they can, also taking them in cars to move them a bit forward, closer to safety. So us as a humanitarian organization, what we want to do now is we have been able to do this first cross-line operation. We want to go back in, of course, for safe passage for the civilians, hoping to be able, of course, to go to Mariupol, but continue basically helping those civilians, but also bringing humanitarian aid in. These 5 days, we were able to see that people outside of Mariupol, prices of food are soaring. So some people have their own crops, which they can live on. But for others, it's not a sustainable, of course, situation. And they are also helping those who are able to flee Mariupol. So these are also these host communities we also need to support. There's also lack of medication. So we were able to really see these humanitarian needs that we know of course, of Mariupol, which is also in the surrounding areas.
Sure. And I mean, it sounds from what you're saying, I mean, harrowing scenes. And you've talked a lot about the danger facing these civilians, but, there's the obvious danger facing your staff. I mean, these are very difficult conditions, I'd imagine, for you and your teams to actually operate in.
Of course, but our role here as a humanitarian organization is to help people where they need it. So we have to go towards the area where there are needs and where people have to go out. We're not the story, it's the people who are. So we really have to be where they need assistance. And of course, the closest you are to front line, the greater the needs, because what for us is quite simple daily things that we can get as food, water, safe water, go to the hospital, and medication, when you're close to the front line, quickly shortages arrive. And we need to be able to get that humanitarian in. And when we then have dialogues, of course, with the different parties in order to facilitate the safe passage, also bring humanitarian aid in, we need, of course, security guarantees for our staff. But when we talk about security guarantees for our staff, it includes, of course, when we do operations, security for the civilians. And what we also had, for instance, on our convoy were 2 specialists in what we call a bit weapon contamination, and is basically to make sure that the road that we are taking in order to be able to evacuate the civilians is safe. We are close to front line. There can be mines. There can be unexploded ordnance. And during the road, people would stop, need to go stretch their legs. There were 350 people in these buses. They were packed. People were standing. So of course, when we would stop, they would get out. Some, of course, also needed to go to the toilets, and they would start going out of the street, out of the road, which is, of course, can be extremely dangerous. So here we have colleagues who are also looking to be able to make sure that the people are secured and that there won't be, of course, a drama on the way.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking